This is the last section, and I think this is a section that I was like, we were looking at this for a while, but I was a little hesitant because there was so much being said around this whole thing. But I was watching, I've watched several. I've watched RT, Sputnik, Chinese media. And according to the spokesperson for the Russian Defense Ministry, Ukraine developed, and this is what they're saying, that Ukraine developed a bioweapons program funded by the U.S. Department of Defense. And they discovered this during military operations that had documents that showed that there was an urgent demand to destroy any evidence of the program's existence on February 24th, because they knew that with the Putin's quote unquote invasion, that this was going to happen. And you guys can see one of the translated documents, one part of it, and how it says State Institution, Ukrainian Research, Anti-Plague Institute, which was named after Mechenkov Ministry of Health of Ukraine. And I wanted to go over some of what this means and what exactly, like, why it's even a thing. Basically, this is being denied by fact checkers from the West. If you look at, like, there's an article by factcheck.org that says this is entirely false, but the US hasn't said anything as much, and Russia is continuing to review these documents. But essentially, this is a violation of international law, specifically of Article 1 of the UN Biological Weapons Convention, that clearly prohibits the development of bioweapons. And it's also, of course, further proof, I think, of the West, particularly that the US has been using Ukraine as its dump/toilet bowl. This is what we've been talking about, how they've been running experiments and just everything in Ukraine for the longest time. Particularly what they found was in relation to anthrax and other type of bioweapons. And this is, of course, still like developing. That according to Russia, they're going over the documents. So it's something that I wanted to point out because there's not a whole lot of information on it, but I wanted to also just amplify that they talk about the emergency destruction of the biological pathogenic agents that are used to provide control systems for laboratory research. And that's just the more of what's in that document. So so you guys can see it. And there was an article written by Great Game India where they talk about how the US Embassy actually removed all evidence of Ukraine bioweapons labs, and that the data, they were able to gather the data of that via a web archive. And this was 2 days after their report that US biolabs in Ukraine could be targeted by Russians. The US Embassy removed all evidence of biolabs in Ukraine from their website. I'm just going to read a little bit of this. The US has 6 facilities in Ukraine. That led to several people wondering if Russia is actually targeting the secret US bioweapons labs in Ukraine. That's not necessarily 100% confirmed. I've seen multiple people say different things on that. But the embassy website did remove all evidence of biolabs in Ukraine, and that these are funded and jointly operated by the US Department of Defense with the DoD. And these documents include important construction, financing, and permit details for bioweapon laboratories in Ukraine. And the US government, of course, is scrubbing this from the internet. And they talk about gain of function and bioweapons research, that there's a lot of interest in that. So this is interesting in that context. And they also talked about how the US DoD funded at least 15 different biolabs in Ukraine, and that they're not Chinese or Russian biolabs. At least 8 of them have been operated exclusively by the US. And quote, these laboratories consolidate and secure pathogens and toxins of security concern to conduct enhanced biosecurity, biosafety, and biosurveillance measures through international research partnerships. Each facility costs the US taxpayers anywhere from 1.8 to over 3 million. The DoD facilitated the permit process to allow Ukrainian scientists to work with the pathogens of pandemic potential. And they work directly with Ukraine's Ministry of Health, the State Service of Ukraine for Food and Safety and Consumer Protection, the National Academy of Agrarian Sciences, and the Ministry of Defense. And it includes facilities in Odessa, Vinnytsia, Uzhgorod, Lviv, Kiev, Kherson, Ternopil, and Crimea, Luhansk, and of course, Kharkiv and Mykolaiv. And they've reached the level 2 status in biosafety in recent years that has allowed scientists to experiment with viruses and bacteria. And yeah, so this is, like I said, developing. But if you guys can see, this is one example. If you go to the article, they have a list of the web archives that were removed from by the U.S. Embassy. Because if you click on the original link, you won't be able to find it. But if you go to the archive link, you can see how they're describing the project, the donor, the beneficiaries, the recipient, the contractor team, and all sorts of things on that level. So I just wanted to point that out. I particularly, just based on what I've seen, I find it extremely interesting in that context. I don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be more than that, but I mean, I just find it as proof of that the United States has been doing whatever they want in Ukraine. And this has been relevant for a while. Like, it's been obvious for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I would add that if there's nothing to hide, then why are they scrubbing it?
Right. Right.
Maybe some FOIA ninja at the Intercept can get to the bottom of this. Well, look, I haven't. Yeah, I know.
They'll be interested in this. Yeah.
I haven't looked too much into this story, but it's interesting to hear Russians putting this out.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see if it's confirmed, or I'm curious about how factcheck.org got to the bottom of it so quickly.
Right.
What resources are at their disposal to debunk this definitively? That's my question. But it's worth pointing out that the strain of anthrax, because they say that they were manufacturing anthrax or something like that. The strain of anthrax that helped push the United States into war with Saddam Hussein came from a U.S. biolab was the Fort Detrick biolab. That was the strain. That's where it came from. We still don't really have a whole lot of answers about that. And I will say that the U.S. has a long history of biowarfare. In fact, the United States has been doing biowarfare since before there was a United States, when we were giving smallpox blankets to Native Americans. So again, I'm not going to say like one way or the other how it is, but it wouldn't be totally surprising to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this wouldn't be anything new, but I think people are kind of more alert to it in the context of gain of function research and Anthony Fauci and, Bill Gates and all of that. So I think it's something worth looking at, specifically. Like they were talking about it on Russian media specifically. So it was, they're saying they have documents to prove this, and that this is a violation of international law. It's also hypocrisy by the West, and also obviously a complete disregard for the potential of any sort of thing to get out, which is something that has been flowing, of course, due to the pandemic. I don't know if let's see. I guess, Oz, if you can go to slide 52, I wanted to see if we could show this video that you have, or 53. So this is a video of the Irish lawmakers on Wednesday calling for the West's double standards for imposing sanctions on Russia after invading Ukraine, but not doing the same to Israel over its violations in Palestine. So I wanted to kind of end with that one. If you could play it. I can't hear it.
With my own eyes.
There we go.
I seen the apartheid wall in Jerusalem. I was in Ramallah. I travelled to Hebron. I seen what happened in Hebron, where that city and community are devastated to protect hundreds of settlers, illegal settlers. It's a damning indictment in our country that in the 1980s we led the way confronting the South African apartheid regime, yet today we can't even pass legislation that bans illegal settler goods. These settlements are illegal under international law, yet we do commerce with those who are responsible for that repugnant situation. We can't even do that. We can't even pass that law in this country. We can't recognize the Palestinian state.
History will judge those who sit on the fence, and history will shame those who bury their heads in the sand while the Palestinian people continue to suffer at the hands of an oppressive, brutal, occupying apartheid state that is Israel. Minister, you must act. You cannot afford to sit on your hands and not act. You must call Israel out for the apartheid policies and the apartheid regime in which they use against the Palestinian people.
Amnesty International report is clear. It's devastating in its clarity. It concludes that Israel perpetrates apartheid. It notes that Israel's civilian administration, its military authorities, its governmental and quasi-governmental institutions are involved in the enforcement of the system of apartheid against Palestinians. It is as frank and as clear as that. It goes on to say that the scale and seriousness of these violations documented in the report make it clear that the international community needs to urgently and drastically change its approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and recognise the full extent of the crimes that Israel perpetrates against the Palestinian people. Crimes that they commit, Minister, day and daily.
The report makes for disturbing reading. It outlines how Palestinians are dealt with as an inferior racial group and how Israel oppresses and segregates them. It shows how Israel is putting in place a regime aiming to dominate and oppress Palestinians. It does this through territorial fragmentation, segregation and control, dispossession of land and property, and by the denial of economic and social rights, but also through forcible transfers, administrative detention and torture, unlawful killings, denial of basic human rights and freedoms, and by persecution.
Ireland has a long and proud tradition of support and solidarity with the people of Palestine. While many of the crimes of Israel's apartheid have long been raised in the Dore, the EU's central involvement in the arms trade to Israel has seldom been raised. EU members have profited well from Israeli apartheid over the years. Since 2012, EU member states have sold arms to Israel to the tune of nearly 700 million per year. Between 2014 and 2018, Germany and Italy alone supplied 35% of Israel's arms imports. EU states make large profits selling deadly arms to states like Israel, states that frequently abuse international law, suppress and murder peaceful protesters.
Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and Green TD stood up one after the other, saying it was intolerable. The thuggery and the warmongering and the brutality of Putin, you wouldn't stand for it, urgent action had to be taken. But we've got to be much more careful with the Palestinians and their treatment. And I haven't even got time to the briefing I organised this week about the people of Yemen and how Saudi Arabia, the most despotic regime in the world, armed to the teeth by the United States, Britain, France and others, killing 337,000 people in Yemen in the last 5 years, 10,000 children. Any action against the United States for arming them? or Britain, or France, or Saudi itself? No. No action, no sanctions, no outrage. Words of concern. We'll raise it. We'll raise it. We'll call on them.
So that was a great summary, and I just got to remind everybody. I think like a day ago, if a little bit more, Syria, Damascus was bombed again.
Last night, I thought.
Yeah, I'm like having my days. I'm thinking about like where we are at versus where they're at. But like, yeah, essentially last night. And do we see any call to freeze assets, to stop this sort of, I mean, it's just hypocrisy. We know it's there. I don't know, like it's a little more than just, these are just countries in West Asia and the global South. It's obviously a power thing, right? Like Russia is a very powerful enemy of the West, and Israel is a very powerful ally. We're not going to go after Israel. We're not going to go after Saudi Arabia because they're our allies. And the juxtaposition of that is so vast that I just have a hard time seeing how people, are just so hypnotically almost falling with, the whole Ukrainian flag symbolics. And do you think that that's actually as big as they're making it seem, Alex? Like the whole like support for Ukraine, or do you think like it's exaggerated in media to make it look like it's bigger?
Well, I'd like to be able to say that I thought it was trumped up. I'm not so sure that's the case. I remember, through the Russiagate years, trying to talk to any liberal over the age of 50 about Russia was it was a non-starter. Anything you said in defense of Russia or in defense of actual evidence was a non-starter. I think that people are really propagandized, and we have a pretty solid situation of mass formation psychosis thanks to the pandemic that is being retooled for this great power competition. So, I mean, as much as optimistic as I'd like to be, I really can't be. And you see this with the YouGov poll that came out. I tweeted about it quite a bit, where most people are in favor of confrontation, whether it be a hybrid warfare or maybe not to their knowledge, direct warfare via no-fly zone with Russia. These are highly favored policies. It's unfortunate that that people aren't quite aware of what they entail. I don't think people realize that a 30% devaluation of the ruble is a genocidal policy that is aimed at starving the poor of Russia. I don't think that people realize that a no-fly zone is a policy that would push for a hot war between nuclear powers. I do think that in general, American people are good, and that if they truly understood the implications of these policies, they would not favor them. However, we are a deeply propagandized country, and that's why it's important to have this kind of alternative media that pushes back on this.
I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, I agree that the vast majority of people here are propagandized. They just don't hear the news. And also alternative media is largely censored, suppressed. And that's what we're fighting now. I mean, we've been fighting this for a while, but it's getting worse and worse with the censorship and the precedents that are being set.